everybody, Peter here from the Esoteric Order of Gamers. Welcome and thank you for watching. Today I'm going to talk about Wayfarers of the South Tigris. It's a game from Garphill Games and it's very much in the Euro kind of style. Not really the kind of game that I play usually, but I do like to play a wide range of games and I was very interested to check this one out. On the surface, it's a very icon-heavy Euro victory point exercise. There's engine building, all the kind of things that I usually avoid in a game. So let's find out if I enjoyed it or not. Well, before I get started, let me tell you that the lovely people from Garphill Games sent me this for free so I could check it out, do a review for you, and also make you a rules summary. So if you go along to my website at orderofgamers.com, you'll find that I've got a rules summary and reference for this game, which I think you'll find incredibly useful when you're learning how to play. The rulebook is fine, it's good, it just goes into a lot of detail about specifics before it gets into the flow of the game, which I found a little bit confusing. Eventually I sorted it out, and I must say that once you start playing, the rules do recede into the background, and once you've worked out what all the icons mean, you'll find it's relatively easy to play and remember what to do. However, when you get started, it can be a little bit daunting. What we have is, well, thematically, we've got the Abbasid Caliphate in about 820 AD, or CE these days. I don't know anything about this period of history, I must admit, and I'm going to go off and research it and find out more because it sounds very interesting. And the thing I love about this game is that it's not about war and conquest. It's about explorers and cartographers and scientific people going off to explore and map the world around them. So you have a central board here and there are three sections which you can use both sides of. So you can mix it up a little bit with different sections for the boards. And this shows you a scroll. And this represents your journaling of your explorations and adventures. So you have a marker which moves along the trail here, and eventually when you get to one of these last spaces, the game will wrap up and everyone will count up their victory points and you see who wins. Now you have a panorama in front of you, and this is one of the very attractive things about the game, is that you have this player board and then you can place cards to either side of it and create this lovely graphic panorama. On one side you have land cards, so that goes off into the land as you're exploring that way. On the other side you have water cards, so you can explore out into the oceans. And above those you have star and planet and comet cards, which are beautiful representations of the vistas above your land and sea. And so by the end of the game you get this very nice personalized panorama in front of you, and it's quite satisfying to build this up. But how do you get those cards, I hear you ask? Well, and I just point out here that I'm just doing a rough overview of the rules. I'm not going to go into great detail. But basically, it's all about tags. Now, tags are icons that represent various things like planets and vistas and harbours and open sea and cities and all this stuff. And basically, you're getting tags to allow you to do other things and to get combinations of tags to give you victory points. So it's all about getting these icons to allow you to do other things. Now there's so much lovely complexity here. If you like a complex game, you're really going to enjoy getting into the minutiae of all this detailed interactions between the different icons and things you can do. So basically you take turns, and during your turn you can either place a worker, you can place a die, or you can rest. Now you have a number of workers. You only get 2 to start with, but you can get more during the game. You have a certain amount of influence which you can place on things. I'll tell you how that works in a moment. And you have the all-important dice. You start with 3, but there are another 2 you can pick up during the game. And at the start of the game, you'll roll these dice, and that becomes your little supply, and you can use the values on these dice to do things. You do this on your caravan, which is the main area of your player board. And on this caravan, there's a little grid, and you can see that the numbers correspond vertically to things below them. In this one, the 1 and the 6 already give you 2 tags. The 1 gives you a camel and the 6 gives you a telescope. And you can use that tag to do stuff. So for example, if you had a number 1 die, you could place it on the camel here because it's a dice placement space with a camel on it, and a number 1 die gives you a camel. You could place that there. Next to it, it says you have to pay 2 provisions. You start off with some provisions and silver to start the game. And then you get a yellow card, which is a land card, and 1 silver. So it's all about understanding these icons and all the things you do. You can place dice, you can pay costs, and in return you get to pick up cards and do other things and get provisions and silver to let you do other things. Rinse and repeat over and over and over, trying to get as many victory points as you can. And of course there are heaps and heaps and heaps of combos you can do to maximize your engine building to get the most victory points. One of the great ways to get victory points is to get space cards, and these go above your land and sea cards. On the yellow bar, they give you a certain number of points depending on what other things you have in your tableau. And you can also get inspiration cards, which you can tuck under the space cards to even double those victory point rewards if you have a prerequisite of stuff. You can also get townsfolk cards, and these you tuck under your land and sea cards, and they can give you things like free tags, so executing that particular land and sea card is a lot easier, or other abilities. Now, I've forgotten to lay them all out on the board, but there are also heaps and heaps of tiles as well. Now, if you can get these tiles, you place these on your caravan, and this is where you can customize your caravan and what you get with the die results. So you could put down, for example, this tag, which allows you to get a pigeon, a camel, and a ship if you roll a 3. However, there are also other tags that give you dice manipulation symbols. So you could turn a 4 into a 3 or a 4 into a 5 or something like that. So there's a whole little mini game almost on this little caravan where you can customize it and make sure you manipulate your dice results into the results that you want to use. When you place workers, you can place them on any of the cards around the outside of the board. And if you do so, you execute the action that is on the board where that card is placed. If someone comes along and manages to buy that card from some other action, they can take that worker that's on the card as well. So this is how you get your workers back in your hand. There are other special actions that allow you to get workers as well. Finally, there's the rest action, and this allows you to get all your dice that you've already placed, and optionally ones that are already in your supply. You can re-roll them and get new results. And when you do this, you also get rest actions. You get a free one on your player board already, which allows you to journal and to get a silver, but you can get more as you place cards in your tableau. Now, journaling is very important because that allows you to move forward on the board. And as you move forward on the board, there are certain prerequisites you'll need to jump from space to space. You'll also, when you get to various spaces, you'll get certain rewards and things as well. There are multiple paths to take on the journal track, so it's also very interesting to see which way you go, and this is going to very much influence the kind of actions you take and the way that you push your particular engine during the game. Another thing I haven't mentioned are the guilds. There are 3 guilds at the end of the board, and as you go through the game, you'll be placing influence on them. You can spend influence from these guilds to do various things. They also have a special ability each, which allows you to do even more stuff. And if you have the most influence on a guild at the end of the game, you're going to get a bonus 3 victory points. Influence can also be placed on cards around the board as well. And if someone gets that card and your influence is on it, they'll have to give you 1 silver or 1 provision. So there's a lot going on, as you can tell, and this is just the lightest overview of what happens in this quite complex game. So the question is, what did I think of it? Well, when I sat down with Wayfarers of the South Tigris, I sat down with an open mind because, as you know, I'm not usually a fan of victory point engine building Euro kind of games. I always find them a bit lacking in theme, a bit mechanical, and one thing I always don't like is the big adding up of scores at the end of the game, which I feel is kind of anticlimactic. They also have a tendency towards multiplayer solitaire. There's not a lot of player interaction going on. All these factors make them not my favourite type of game, even though I realise they're incredibly popular and lots of people like this kind of engine building game. So, Wayfarers has all these things. It does have the long-winded adding up of victory points at the end. It does have the icon soup. There's so many icons. It does have the multiplayer solitaire aspect, and that you're pretty much doing your own thing, except you can get in the way of other people's game by getting cards and doing actions that they obviously want. You might be able to block them on the journal track, things like that. But in general, you're doing your own thing. So you'd think I wouldn't like it. You'd be wrong. I actually did really enjoy playing Wayfarers. I was actually surprised that it was so enjoyable. There's something satisfying about this game in that there are just so many routes to success. There are so many decisions to make it's quite involving. It drags you in. And even though the theme, which is a very unusual one, and I really love to see these historical themes and just the general idea that it's not about conquest, it's actually about learning, which is just a lovely idea. The theme does sort of come across, and it's mainly because you're building this beautiful tableau and it looks so nice with your lands and your cities and everything. So there's a satisfaction in doing that. There's also a satisfaction as you play and those combos start to come out and you realize you have to do certain things. And sometimes you're following a certain route because you want to, and then suddenly you have to follow another route because you have to. You might find, oh, I really want to do this, and then you realize you're missing some tag or provision or silver or whatever, and then you have to go back a step and think, okay, what do I need to get that thing so I can do that thing? And then you might get to that and think, oh, gee, I've got to go back another step because I really need 1 silver to kick off that allows me to do that allows me to do that. If that kind of thing appeals to you, you're going to love this game. That's what it's all about. I imagine as you play a lot more that you get more and more used to these actions, and of course you can get more and more strategic. When you first go in for your first game, it can be very overwhelming and you just do a few actions, you think, what do I do? But then as you move along the journal track, that can very much dictate what kind of things you want to do depending on the path you're taking along the journal track. Because if you get to a point where obviously you can't cross into the next space without having a certain number of tags or a certain number of cards, then obviously you have to put all your attentions towards getting those things so you can progress on the track. So I really like the fact that even though at first it's overwhelming, soon the game sort of tells you, you've got to do this and you've got to do that. And you can direct that and you can change it in different ways and you can push it in different directions, but it also gives you that sort of little push, which is very, very nice. Really, it's just a very clever game. And when I play a game like this, I think, how do they design something like this? There's so much going on. They really must have play tested it a gazillion times to get any sense of balance or anything like that. It's really very, very clever. Will I keep coming back to it a lot? Probably not. And that's just because of my own personal taste in games. I can see myself thinking, oh yeah, I feel like a sort of, heavy-ish Euro game occasionally. And this is probably the one I'd bring out. 1, because I don't have many of them in my collection, but 2, because this is one of the more involving, interesting ones that I've played. I do always get frustrated with that thing at the end where you sit down and tote up all the victory points though. It's so anticlimactic to me. I hate doing maths at the end of the game, but that's just a feature of these type of games. And some people really enjoy that sense of adding up the points and then the surprise of who wins at the end. That's not really for me, but I understand some people love it. Now, design-wise, I wasn't initially enamored of the style of illustration and graphic design here. I preferred the more precise style of things like the Circadians games. But again, that's just a matter of taste. And I must admit, as I was playing, I started to enjoy it more. The iconography all has this white border around everything, which I know is to lift it from the background, but I just feel kind of dilutes the strength of the iconography. The iconography is, to my mind, just a little bit messy and a little bit overly detailed, especially with things like the little vistas and open water and all that kind of stuff, because everything is outlined in this white stroke. But this is just personal taste, and this kind of thing disappears into the background once you get used to the iconography and what everything does. And of course, on the back of the book, you have an icon guide, and you'll find yourself after just the first couple of turns not referring to this at all. So that goes to show that everything works. And while I'm not personally a fan of the illustration style, it does look really lovely when you get your little panorama going and they all join up together and you have your land and sea and skies and planets above. So that's Wayfarers of the South Tigris. I was really pleasantly surprised about this game. Again, not my style of game usually, but if I wanted to play this kind of game, and occasionally I do, I would take this one out and put it on the table because it's very involving and there's so much to get into if you love that kind of engine building and combo building and this kind of deep Euro experience. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. Now, I'll remind you again to go to the website where I've made a rule summary and reference for this game. I think you'll find it very, very useful. Go and download it. There's a link to it in the show notes. And while you're there, if you really enjoy it, leave me a little donation perhaps, because it took a while to make. or even better, if you appreciate the work of the Esoteric Order of Gamers, that's me, you could join me on my Patreon page, patreon.com/esoteric order, and support the work that I do and have been doing for over a decade now. Check me out on social media. Please subscribe and hit all notifications if you haven't already. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.